Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Montgomery, for being here. Very much appreciate it. We've been talking a lot today, of course, about increasing home ownership and addressing the shortage of affordable housing across this country. So one of the issues I want to take a look at is manufactured housing, because in many cases it can cost up to 30% less, and in some cases more, for folks to be able to afford that. So if we're going to talk about it, though, we have to make sure it's a way to provide affordable housing and truly make sure that it is. I don't know if you're aware of what's occurred in Iowa over the last year or so, but I'd love to give you a brief background. Unfortunately, a company named Havenpark Capital, which is a fund from Utah, has bought now 7 manufactured housing communities in Iowa, and then they proceeded to raise the lot rents for the residents there between 20 and 70%. So they came in and just raised the rate 20 to 70% for these families, many of whom are on fixed incomes. I visited one of those communities, Midwest Country Estates in Waukee, and saw firsthand the terrible position that these folks are really being put in. And just yesterday I spoke to one of those residents, Matt Chapman, who's about to be paying 70% of his income for housing. We know the standard definition of severely cost burdened is paying 50% of your income on rent. And here's a constituent who owns his home outright, has no mortgage, and has to pay 20% more than the 50% that we think is severely cost burdened. So he doesn't know what he's going to do, and many of his neighbors just don't know how they're going to make this happen. It's just simply unaffordable for so many residents like him and others across the country. Many of these properties were purchased with federally supported loans. So we need to make sure that our constituents aren't being taken advantage of because they can't relocate. And these are the kind of predatory practices that unfortunately are being allowed to continue. So I'd love to ask you, Commissioner, I've been working on trying to find solutions to prevent this from happening again. And given your experience in housing, I just wanted to ask you, what recommendations do you have that we should be putting in place?
Well, and I'd be happy, by the way, to follow up when we have more time to discuss it. But manufactured housing is, 22 million Americans live in manufactured housing. We regulate the construction of manufactured housing throughout the country. Between my time as commissioner last time and this time, the technology, the construction standards, and all that have made leaps and bounds so much we're almost having a hard time keeping up with it. We've also been looking at the financing aspect relative to FHA. There's Title I and Title II, not getting too in the weeds here. The Title I doesn't have a lot of volume in it. Tends to be more sort of what they call chattel loans versus the traditional FHA Title II. We think there's a way to make it more affordable because you heard me reference earlier in my opening statement, the average income of a manufactured home owner is between $30,000 and $50,000 a year. So, and again, it's part of the things we're looking at in sort of a pro-consumer aspect, ways that we can perhaps get some of the cost of financing down. We have less purview, being honest with you, on sort of the structure of communities. Again, more so the regulation of the actual manufacturing of it, of the structure.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I would love to see what information you have. At least 3 of these 7 properties were bought with Fannie Mae loans, and it's not as if federal government's not involved in it. I hate to see that. We believe that they actually overpaid as well for the community that I was just talking with you about. I'm sure they did. And I think that we could have, if we had pieces in place, those owners could have pooled together and possibly purchased it for themselves and been able, to stay in their homes. And not just to afford it, but when we see these kinds of predatory actions, they're asking children to literally give up their dogs because they're too big for the homes, according to their new rules. They're forcing families to tear down swing sets that they don't think are, good looking enough, but these aren't people who can afford those $2,000, $3,000 rainbow sets that some other people can. So any help that you can give us, these people truly have been put in a position where they don't know what their answer will be. Many of them will not be able to afford this and will be forced out of their homes, including taking their children with them and not being able to find an affordable option. So I'd appreciate your follow-up on some of those things we just talked about and any other things that you might think we could put in place.
Absolutely. I will look forward to following up with you or your staff on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.